Now, as South Africa holds peace talks for Ethiopia's warring parties, the international community is urging for a ceasefire and access to humanitarian aid for millions that have been affected by the protracted war. Fighting continues to be reported in parts of the country north, with the UN saying that hostilities continue to escalate, leading to mounting humanitarian needs. Delegations from both the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front are in South Africa for dialogue. FSN's Kaleto Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
The government of Ethiopia says it views the talks as an opportunity to peacefully resolve the conflict. The rebel group, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, says it is pressing for an immediate cessation of hostilities, unfettered humanitarian access and withdrawal of Eritrean forces. But in parts of Ethiopia's north, their military confrontation is yet to stop. Fresh fighting began in August after a 5-month humanitarian ceasefire. Aid agencies say the distribution of supplies to over 9 million people is still being hampered by the insecurity. Aid convoys through one of the major road routes remain suspended since 24th August. The United Nations says to date, 26 humanitarian workers have lost their lives since the conflict in the country's north began in November 2020. The latest case was reported on 14th October. The Ethiopian government says it is working with humanitarian agencies to send assistance to areas that it is taking over from the control of the rebel group. It says it is also working to restore services that are needed by the people. The US has asked Eritrea to withdraw its forces from the northern Ethiopia. Eritrea is accused of sending troops to support the Ethiopian government. And even as the main factions exhibit open mistrust for each other, political analysts say their acceptance to face each other at the peace table could open avenues towards silencing the guns in the country's north.
Well, to contextualize the toll that the 2-year war has had on civilians in the Tigray region, we're now joined via Zoom by Human Rights Watch senior Ethiopia researcher Laetitia Bader. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I was speaking recently to Lord Malik Brown with Open Societies Foundations, and he says that the Tigray conflict has sadly become even a forgotten war. It's been going on for so long. And I guess when that happens, that's when a lot of things get missed and the travesty, the size of it, is missed. Give us a sense of just how much devastation has been caused and disruption and loss.
Well, I'm not sure I would call it a forgotten war in that I think it is important to underscore how much since the beginning of the conflict that the federal government of Ethiopia, first and foremost, but not only, has tried to prevent reporting on what is going on. Since the beginning of the conflict, internet has been disconnected in the Tigray region. As we speak, the telephone lines have been down, have been disconnected for 15 months. There's no electricity in the region. There's no banking services. And access is severely restricted. As your correspondent was underscoring, as we speak, since August, there has been no humanitarian access into the region. But even before this, during the 5 months of what the government had declared as a humanitarian truce, aid was only just trickling in. And in that period, for example, fuel was coming in very limited number. And that was having a massive impact on the ability of the humanitarian community to distribute the assistance which was making it in. So I do think it's important to underscore that there has been a deliberate attempt, first and foremost by the federal government, to make it very difficult for the world, journalists, human rights organizations like ours, especially to report in real time. What we do know is devastating, as you underscore. We've documented war crimes by all warring parties, including by the Tigrayan forces against civilians in the Amhara region last year. We've again received reports of killings and looting by Tigrayan forces when they moved into the Amhara region in the more recent bout of fighting. We've also documented a campaign of ethnic cleansing, which is ongoing to date against Tigrayans in the contested Western Tigray zone. Now, this is an area where the Eritrean forces were present throughout and where they stayed even during the humanitarian truce period. So we really are talking about some of the most serious international crimes which have been committed. And to date, we have seen no real accountability for any of these crimes. And this is obviously one of the key issues which needs to be on the table in the discussions which are starting tomorrow. First and foremost, clear commitments to end deliberate harm to the civilian population, and also clear commitments which need to be rolled out immediately to allow humanitarian access and access to basic services.
I don't know how much you do know, given the blackout and access, but day to day, what is life like in Tigray at the moment?
I mean, it is very difficult to get a good sense. What we do know is that since the fighting resumed again in August, late August, there has been heavy shelling, including using airstrikes, drone strikes in urban areas. We know that, for example, the town of Shire, which fell last week and was taken over by federal government forces and Eritrean forces, there had been shelling on a regular basis for almost 1 week, 10 days before that had happened. In one of the strikes which occurred just a few days before the government forces entered the town, a humanitarian worker, as your correspondent pointed out, was killed. Another humanitarian worker was injured in that strike. And some of the most devastating stories we've also collected is as a result of the effective siege which has been imposed on the region for